BookTube, I am so pleased to be able to make this video in response to another video by another amazing BookTube creator collaborator named Heather Reads, who recently mused about boredom in reading, and particularly with regards to Kerouac. And this has really given me food for thought. I think there are plenty of people who don't like Kerouac, but not probably that many that because they find it dull. But I've had a good think, and I think I can come up with a few possible reasons one might think that. And then I'll get into ranking the 5 books I've read, and suggesting that some other books besides On the Road might better please the palate of writers who might be bored with Kerouac as presented in On the Road. So Kerouac is actually French Canadian, which would be Catholic. I'm not sure if his upbringing was. I know he went to a Catholic school, and he grew up in Lowell, a mill town in Massachusetts, very old New England, very Protestant. So I don't know if that gave him a certain outsider feeling, or if he struggled with his sexuality. I'm not sure. He went to Columbia College on a football scholarship, so he was certainly much more All-American than you might think. And remember, this is the 50s. In fact, his first book, The Town and the City, about Grow Up in Lowell, was published in 1950. He wrote in 59 Maggie Cassidy, about sort of his first love as back in the day, back in New England, and Dr. Sachs in 59, which is also about his growing up and sort of his daemons, his otherness personified. So I haven't read those novels, but I think that some of you might enjoy reading those more than On the Road. It would probably be sort of more grounded in a place, and the quest for identity in those younger years might be more sympathetic to you than a sort of co-ed, college kid running off and making a big spring break of America and Mexico and God knows what. Yes, so sameness was something Heather mentioned. I'm not sure if that's the exact word she used, but if I understood her right, I think that was part of the problem. And I can see that there is a certain sameness, isn't there, with these college kids. Even in their rebellions, there can be a sameness, and certainly of a class. They have sort of their working class mascot that they tickle around with them, they're fascinated with. And I'll get to that in a minute, because I do think there is a polyphony in Kerouac that I think if others could hear it, that they wouldn't be bored. But anyway, yeah, so, Holden Caulfield, that type, came from a bit of money. All of his madness was financed by his dear mama. And so, yeah. And the other, and there's so that class thing, there's also this idea of tourism. So, if you watch, as I do, YouTubes about Bangkok, where I live, so many of them go to the exact same places and say the exact same things. And of course, they're breezing into town. They don't know a great amount about Bangkok. But there is definitely a sameness and a feeling that they're not getting really to the reality of the place. They're missing so much. And perhaps there was some of that in On the Road. After all, this was his first book after The Town and the City. It was followed by Dharma Bums, which is also considered a masterpiece. Then Subterraneans, then Mexico City Blues, which is one that I also read. And then the 2 last ones I'll tell you in a minute when I rank them. I read Kerouac as I read a scathing New Yorker interview of On the Road at the time of its of Dharma Bums at the time of its publication, and they weren't having any of it. They thought that he totally got, for instance, African Americans totally wrong, that he didn't know really about jazz or Buddhism or any of these things he was writing about. And that's sort of how we feel today, right? Like we're very hard on people who take a little step into something and maybe a misstep, and we're not feeling that expansive freedom to explore that I think you got very much in the 60s and to some extent back in the 50s with the Beats. So I do believe his desire was very sincere, that he was trying to listen to these hobos on the train, trying to listen to the Mexicans when he went down to Mexico. You know, he was close friends with Allen Ginsberg, who's very gay, and so he did. It seems to me really try to encounter a lot of different people where they're at, and whether he totally got them in the fullness of their being, we can argue. Maybe not. He's a bit of a day tripper. He's on his way. There's some hedonism involved as well, especially in Mexico. I'll get to that. But that's my feeling about Kerouac in general. And I actually, when I was in Africa, it was free for us Peace Corps to take the Foreign Service exam. So I took it on a lark just to see, because what was this terrible exam that I heard about? And I passed, to my great surprise. And one of the reasons I was greatly surprised was a lot of psychological questions, not that much sort of poli-sci and world history. But I wrote my essay on the polyphony of Jack Kerouac. Some might say it's a cacophony, but anyway, I thought that was pretty out there. I mean, the thing ended in an ellipse. Is all I really remember about it. But I guess they liked it, so yeah, I didn't go on with the process of the group interview because I didn't want to mess with people who were seriously interested in that path. But anyway, so let's rank our Kerouacs. So number one, gonna put Pick. So Pick and Satori in Paris are two novellas that are published together often. Satori in Paris is awesome, but Pick really takes the cake. So Pick is the story of a couple young African Americans from the South at the time of just sort of after Reconstruction, the sort of the time of the mass migration of African Americans to the north, to the northern cities. And these are these kids on this bus heading north to who knows what. And I felt, and what do I know either, but I really felt like if he got those kids wrong, at least it wasn't Jack Kerouac that he was presenting. It wasn't Lowell, Massachusetts. He was really trying to figure them out. I don't know why and how he picked them, but he did, and I thought that was really beautiful. I wish it was on the syllabus for all high school kids to read. So feel free to, totally disagree on that if you have a different experience, or a different reading of that history. But I loved it. I will put Dharma Bums next, even though, some of the Buddhism in Kerouac is creative. But, again, he's really, truly trying. And I think this was the time before. I think it wasn't until the 60s that people were really going to India. So I'm not sure how much firsthand knowledge he had. He was probably more like the transcendentalists who were very interested in Brahmanism, that they had encountered through like some of the first translations. So, yes, his interest in Buddhism was quite sincere. And I do love Dharma Bums, just a tiny wee bit more than On the Road. So we're going to put On the Road right in the middle. Next will come Satori in Paris, which is also excellent. And Satori, I don't know if you know, is also a Zen Buddhist term. This, just because it's a little bit shorter, has the same sort of flaw, I don't want to say flaws, but it's very similar to Dharma Bums in its search, except that there's the added element of his search for his roots, because he's French Canadian, Québécois, which in some ways is almost older than France. But anyway, so he's got that sort of search for origins, like a lot of people might have, African Americans going back to Africa or that sort of thing. Latinos going down to Latin America, which brings me to my least favorite, which is Mexico City Blues. I do like his poetry, shorter poetry, more. This is poetic work. I do feel his cadence is a little off with Mexico. There is jazz in Mexico, lots of it, along with Tejano, Norteño, ranchero music and mariachi, but it's Latin jazz. It's a slightly different beat, and he's coming with his New York jazz. Of course, he studied in Columbia, which is where he met Ginsberg and all those folks. So there you go. You might want to try one of those other books. Jack Kerouac Encounters African American Southern Life. Jack Kerouac Encounters Paris. Jack Kerouac Encounters Mexico. Is he a bit of a tourist? Sure. But he's also a bit of what we call a traveler. We used to make the distinction between the traveler and the tourist, right? The traveler, it tries to go off the beaten path, which has become its own giant path now, right? And backpacking now is almost completely glam packing. So, but you can't argue with that. I mean, he was bare bonesing it on these travels and stuff. So, Mama might have had his back, but he certainly slept out in the cold a few times and all that good stuff. Now, if that quest isn't interesting to you in the final analysis, I think it's important to allow oneself to have authors with whom one does not connect for whatever reason and regardless of whatever anybody else thinks. So feel free to dislike Kerouac. All right, so there I said a little bit in my apologia pro suo vita, my apology for his life in the theological sense. I've made a little defense of Kerouac there, and I do enjoy him, obviously. And I want to really read some of those ones from his younger life, Down in the City, Maggie Cassidy, Dr. Sachs. He later wrote some other great books. He wrote Big Sur, which I think I might have read, Visions of Cody, and people loved to play, Roman Clef with, figuring out which of his characters was which real, person. Anyway, which I don't do too much of, but that's another way you can have fun with Kerouac. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say is I really want to thank Heather Reeds, because whether she knew it or not, she approached something that I tried to float early on in my booktube career, which was I was looking for a way to have video to video to video sorts of conversations. I've since joined some reading groups and, Voxer and that sort of conversation a little bit, comments a little bit. But my vision was, I called it Talk SWOP, and it was very much, ending videos with interesting questions and a hard take on a book. And then another person taking up that had also read that book, taking up that hard take and reacting to it and answering those questions. And so on down the line, and everybody linking each other into their comments. So Heather has, whether she knew it or not, kind of created a good template for that. So I'm responding to her video. And then I'm going to end now with, I've given you my take of Kerouac, obviously. And I know these listicles are very popular. And so I've shamelessly done, I think, 3 recently. But, if you like them, I'll do more. But I do insist upon my one book reviews. I think it's good to take one book sometimes. Anyway, but so I should also end with some in questions for anyone else who's read a bunch of Kerouac on the road or whatever, wants to respond to this one and link in through the comments and then ask their own questions at the end of their video. So I would talk about polyphony. Do you feel that he is interested in, does a good job capturing, mishears or represents, or has no business even trying. I know that's a thought nowadays, with the different various diverse groups that he encounters on his travels. His Buddhism. What do we make of his Buddhist? Like many Buddhists, he doesn't have a strict Buddhist practice in that he doesn't begin with the Panchasila, the five, moral rules that should precede in Buddhist thinking the, meditative practices, the, koans or mantras and all that stuff. You have to also really, follow the moral precepts. So what do we think of his sort of hedonism along with his Buddhism? This sort of Buddhism light, Buddhism cheap. What do we think? What else? Is Kerouac boring? There can even be a boringness, I think, maybe in the language. I was thinking that as well. So like, obviously there's a word flow with Kerouac, which, a lot of people find exciting, but it can also be overwhelming, right? It's like if you're in that glass bubble and they're dropping, floating $100 bills around you, bring it on, the more the better, right? But if you're being pelted by gnats, right, or mosquitoes, get away from me. So you could be maybe overwhelmed by his prose in that way. It could be boring. Like any enumeration can be boring. So although I typically tend to like them, like Rabelais famously enumerates a lot of things, I find it fun. So there's another question for you, the style and all that. What else did I want to talk about? It's sort of a boys' club. What is the role of women, if any, in all of this? There's a wife that's around here and again. There's his mother in the back. So there's all of that. What else? So many questions I could ask about Kerouac. Class issues. What should we end on? How. Let's end on how. He saw the best minds of his generation howling mad, all that good stuff Ginsberg said of his fellow beats. Did these guys burn the candle at both ends too much? Did they burn out? What's the one who accidentally shot his wife in Mexico? Was that Burroughs? Yeah, they were drunk or I don't know what, playing William Tell, and that was an awful tragedy. Go back to the women issue. That's why they weren't there. Oh, that's horrible. No. How did the Beats lead to the hippies? What are the similarities? What are the differences? Obviously, there are some similarities. We see the interest in Buddhism, which led to all the stuff with India, the Maharishi and the Beatles going over there and everything like that. The hedonism. I think at a certain point, Jack got into harder stuff than just, the booze and whatnot. So that's dangerous. Okay, that's enough to be getting on with. So those are some questions. You've got my sort of interpretation of Kerouac. And so if you're inspired, if you've read any Kerouac, please make a video responding to this one. And you can link it to me and link it to Heather, and we keep linking each other, and hopefully we'll create this, this almost like a book group in video, not in real time. That's sort of my wish or vision for that. All right, super. And thanks again, Heather Reeds, for inspiring this.